Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars drift past through the large window. The ship had been traveling for 6 months now, carrying 200 humans to their new home in the Kepler system. Everyone was excited about starting fresh on a new world, far from Earth's crowded cities and polluted skies. "Captain, we're approaching the asteroid field," said Amy Rodriguez from her position at the communications station. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel as she checked the ship's sensors. "All systems are running smoothly." Jake nodded and walked over to where Dr. Lisa Blake was studying her computer screen. The science officer had been working non-stop since they entered the outer edge of the Kepler system, cataloging everything they found. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her eyes showed the tiredness that came from too many late nights studying alien rocks and space dust. "Find anything interesting out there, Lisa?" Jake asked. Lisa looked up and smiled. "Actually, yes. Some of these asteroids have mineral compositions we've never seen before. If we can mine them, they could be incredibly valuable for building our colony." She pointed to her screen where colorful charts showed the chemical makeup of nearby space rocks. Ryan Carter, the ship's security chief, walked onto the bridge carrying a cup of coffee. He was a big man with short black hair and serious eyes that seemed to always be watching for danger. "Captain, I've finished the weekly security check. All weapon systems are functioning, but I still think we should be more careful out here. We have no idea what else might be living in this system." Jake understood Ryan's concerns. They were the first humans to travel this far from Earth, and nobody knew what they might find. But so far their journey had been peaceful. The galaxy seemed empty and quiet, just waiting for them to explore it. "Don't worry, Ryan, we've been scanning for months and haven't found any signs of intelligent life. I think we're alone out here," Jake said. Danny Walsh, the chief engineer, called out from his station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, I'm picking up some strange readings from the asteroid field. The computer doesn't recognize the energy signatures." Before Jake could respond, the entire ship shook violently. Emergency lights started flashing red, and a loud alarm began ringing throughout the New Horizon. Amy's hands flew over her controls as she tried to figure out what was happening. "Captain, there's something massive coming out of the asteroid field," Amy shouted over the noise. "It's huge, much bigger than our ship." On the main screen, a ship appeared that made the New Horizon look like a toy. It was dark gray and covered in sharp spikes that looked like giant claws. Strange symbols were carved into its hull, and it moved through space like a hunting animal stalking its prey. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship New Horizon," Jake said into his communication device. "Please identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came quickly, but it wasn't words. The alien ship fired a bright green beam that barely missed the New Horizon's main engine. Another beam followed, this one hitting their shield generators and causing sparks to fly from control panels all over the bridge. "They're attacking us," Ryan yelled as he ran to the weapons station. "Captain, we need to fight back." Jake's mind raced as he tried to understand what was happening. They had come in peace, hoping to find new friends among the stars. Instead, they had found enemies who shot first and asked questions never. "Danny, can you get us out of here?" Jake called to his engineer. Danny's face was pale as he stared at his instruments. "The main engine is damaged, Captain. We can't jump to faster than light speed. We're trapped." The alien ship moved closer, and now they could see smaller ships flying out of it like angry insects. These fighter ships were sleek and deadly, armed with the same green weapons that had damaged the New Horizon. Dr. Blake grabbed Jake's arm. "Captain, I'm detecting life signs on that ship. Whatever's flying it, they're definitely alive, and there are a lot of them." Ryan had managed to get their defensive weapons online. "Captain, I can try to hold them off, but our ship wasn't built for fighting. We're explorers, not warriors." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency landing procedures. Danny, find us the nearest planet or moon where we can set down." "There's a moon orbiting the fourth planet," Danny replied quickly. "It has a thin atmosphere and solid ground. I can try to get us there, but it's going to be rough." The alien fighters swarmed around the New Horizon like wolves around a wounded deer. Their green weapons lit up the darkness of space as they attacked from all sides. The human ship's shields flickered and failed as system after system took damage. In the middle of the battle, Jake caught a glimpse of the aliens themselves through the view screen of one of their fighters. They were tall and covered in what looked like scales, with long claws and teeth that seemed designed for tearing things apart. Their eyes glowed with an intelligence that was both alien and terrifying. Amy was working frantically at her station when she suddenly looked up with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm picking up their communications. The computer is trying to translate, but it's mostly anger and hunting language. They keep using a word that translates to something like prey or food, lemur." New Horizons shuddered as another blast hit their hull. Through the windows, Jake could see pieces of their ship breaking off and floating away into space. They were losing, and losing badly. "Danny, whatever you're going to do it now," Jake ordered. The engineer's hands moved over his controls, like he was playing a piano, trying to coax every bit of power from their damaged engines. "Hold on, everyone, this is going to hurt." The New Horizons suddenly lurched forward, diving toward the moon below them. The alien fighters followed, still firing their weapons. Behind them, the massive alien ship moved like a giant predator, patient and confident that its prey could not escape. As they entered the moon's thin atmosphere, both ships began to shake from the friction of entry. The New Horizon was never designed to land on a planet, and now they were trying to do it while being shot at by aliens who wanted them dead. The last thing Jake remembered before everything went black was the ground rushing up toward them and the sound of metal tearing apart as two ships, human and alien, crashed into the rocky surface of an unknown world. Jake Morrison woke up with his head pounding and blood running down his face. The bridge of the New Horizon was a mess of broken glass, twisted metal, and sparking electronics. Emergency lights flickered on and off, casting strange shadows on the walls. "Is anyone alive?" Jake called out as he pulled himself to his feet. His left shoulder hurt badly, but nothing seemed to be broken. Amy Rodriguez groaned from under a fallen piece of ceiling. Jake hurried over and helped lift the debris off her. She had a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were alert and focused. "Captain, the communication system is completely destroyed," Amy said as she looked around at the ruined bridge. "I can't contact the other sections of the ship or send any messages outside." Dr. Lisa Blake climbed out from behind her workstation, holding her right arm against her body. "I think my wrist is broken, but I'm okay otherwise. The life support systems are still working, but barely. We need to get everyone together and figure out how bad the damage is." Over the next few hours, the survivors found each other throughout the crashed ship. 60 humans had lived through the crash, but many were hurt. Dr. Kevin Ross, the ship's medical officer, set up a temporary hospital in the mess hall. He worked without stopping to treat broken bones, cuts, and burns. Danny Walsh and his engineering team discovered that the New Horizon would never fly again. The main engine was completely destroyed, and the hull had cracked in dozens of places. They were stuck on this moon with no way to call for help. "The good news is that the air outside is breathable," Lisa reported after checking her instruments. "It's thin and has a strange smell, but we won't suffocate. The bad news is that the temperature drops to freezing at night, and some of the plants I've seen look poisonous." Ryan Carter organized teams to explore the area around their crashed ship. The moon was covered with strange purple grass and twisted trees that looked nothing like the plants on Earth. In the distance, they could see mountains and what might have been a lake. "Captain, there's something you need to see," Ryan said when he returned from his first scouting mission. He led Jake to a hill about half a mile from their ship. From the top, they could see the wreckage of the alien vessel that had attacked them. The alien ship had crashed much harder than the New Horizon. It was broken into 3 large pieces, scattered across a valley. But even as they watched, they could see movement around the wreckage. The aliens were alive, and they were working to salvage what they could from their ship. "How many do you think survived?" Jake asked. Ryan studied the distant figures through his binoculars. "Maybe 40 or 50. They're big, Captain. Much bigger than humans. And they're armed." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. The aliens had tried to destroy them in space, and now they were all trapped on the same small moon. It was only a matter of time before the two groups encountered each other. The first real crisis came 3 days later. Several humans had become sick after eating berries they found growing near a stream. Dr. Ross examined the patients and found that they were getting worse, not better. "It's some kind of poisoning," Kevin told Jake privately. "Their bodies are rejecting something in those berries. If I can't figure out an antidote soon, we could lose them." Jake made a decision that shocked everyone. "I'm going to approach the aliens. They've been on this moon for the same amount of time we have. Maybe they know which plants are safe and which ones are dangerous." "Captain, that's insane," Ryan protested. "They attacked us without warning. They tried to kill us all. You can't trust them." But Jake was already putting on his jacket and checking his small sidearm. "I'm not going to watch our people die when there might be help available. Amy, you're with me. Your communication skills might be useful." Amy looked nervous but nodded. "I've been listening to radio signals from their camp. I think I'm starting to understand some of their language patterns." The walk to the alien camp took 2 hours across rocky ground and through forests of the strange purple trees. As they got closer, they could hear voices speaking in harsh, growling tones. The language sounded nothing like any human tongue. The alien camp was organized and efficient. They had built shelters from pieces of their crashed ship and set up what looked like weapon stations around the perimeter. The aliens themselves were even more frightening up close than they had appeared on the view screen. They stood nearly 8 feet tall and were covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. Their hands ended in claws that could easily tear through human skin, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. When they moved, it was with the fluid grace of natural predators. One of the aliens saw Jake and Amy approaching and let out a loud roar that brought others running. Within minutes, they were surrounded by a circle of the towering creatures, all pointing weapons at them. The largest alien stepped forward. Jake recognized him as the one they had seen commanding the ship that attacked them. His scales were darker than the others, and scars covered his arms and face. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks grinding together. Amy listened carefully and then whispered to Jake, "I think he's asking why we're here and why we haven't come to surrender or die." Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward with his hands raised to show he was not holding a weapon. He spoke slowly and clearly, hoping Amy could translate his words. "We are not here to fight. Some of our people are sick from eating the wrong plants. We need help to save them." The translation seemed to confuse the aliens. They spoke rapidly among themselves in their harsh language. The leader's expression was impossible to read, but he seemed genuinely puzzled by Jake's words. Amy listened to their conversation and then turned to Jake with surprise in her eyes. "Captain, I don't think they understand what you mean by asking for help. The concept seems to be completely foreign to them." The alien leader studied Jake for a long moment, then spoke again. Amy translated, "He says that the weak deserve to die and the strong take what they want. He doesn't understand why you would come here instead of trying to kill them or hiding until you die." Jake realized he was facing beings whose entire way of thinking was different from anything human. They saw the universe as a place where only the strongest survived, and everyone else was just food or slaves. The idea of helping someone weaker than yourself was something they had never encountered. Dr. Kevin Ross stepped out from behind a tree where he had been hiding, carrying his medical bag. Jake was surprised to see him, but Kevin just shrugged. "Couldn't let you do this alone, Captain. And if there are injured beings here, they need medical attention regardless of who they are." Without waiting for permission, Kevin walked directly to an alien who was lying on the ground near one of their shelters. The creature was obviously hurt, with what looked like burns covering one side of his body. The other aliens raised their weapons, but their leader held up a hand to stop them. They all watched in amazement as Kevin knelt beside their injured companion and began examining his wounds. For the first time since the crash, Jake saw uncertainty in the alien leader's eyes. The creature was witnessing something that challenged everything he believed about how different species interacted with each other. 3 weeks had passed since the first meeting between humans and aliens. Dr. Kevin Ross had successfully treated several injured aliens, which confused their leader greatly. The alien commander, who Amy had learned was called Zasketh, kept watching, the humans with growing puzzlement. The aliens called themselves Vorthak, and they were having trouble understanding why humans helped each other instead of fighting for dominance. In their society, Only the strongest survived, and showing kindness was seen as weakness that led to death. Jake had established a careful peace between the two groups. They shared information about safe plants and dangerous areas of the moon, but they still camped separately and watched each other with suspicion. Danny Walsh had been working with a Vorthak engineer named Kravth to strengthen their shelters. Even though they could barely communicate, they found ways to show each other different building techniques. Danny was impressed by how strong Vorthak metalworking skills were, while Kravth seemed amazed by human problem-solving methods. Everything changed when Amy detected strange energy readings coming from the moon's sun. She had been monitoring space weather using salvaged equipment from both ships. "Captain, we have a serious problem," Amy announced during the morning briefing. "There's a massive solar storm heading our way. The radiation levels will be deadly if we stay above ground." Dr. Lisa Blake studied Amy's data with growing concern. "She's right. This storm is much stronger than anything we have on Earth. We need underground shelter, and we need it fast." Ryan Carter had been exploring the area and knew about a network of caves about 2 miles from their camp. "There's a cave system in the hills that might protect us, but it's not very big. Both our groups won't fit comfortably." Jake made another decision that surprised everyone. He walked to the Vorthak camp and found Zasketh sharpening his claws on a piece of metal. The alien leader looked up with his usual expression of suspicion and barely controlled violence. "Zasketh, a dangerous storm is coming," Jake said, with Amy translating. "We need to shelter underground together or we will all die." Zasketh's reaction was immediate and predictable. He stood to his full height of nearly 8 feet and growled something that Amy translated as threats and challenges about who was stronger.
"He says that if there's only room for one group in the caves, then we should fight to see who gets to live," Amy explained nervously. Jake shook his head. "Tell him that fighting will get us all killed. The caves are big enough if we work together."
To make them larger and safer. The translation of this concept seemed to break something in Zasketh's mind. He stared at Jake as if the human had suggested something impossible, like flying without wings or breathing underwater. But the solar storm was already beginning. The sky turned an angry orange color and the air started to feel thick and dangerous. Both groups had no choice but to move to the caves together or face certain death from radiation. The next few hours were tense as humans and Vorthak worked side by side to prepare the underground shelter. Danny and Kravth led teams to reinforce weak spots in the cave ceiling. Dr. Blake and Amy set up monitoring equipment to track the storm's progress. The caves were cramped and uncomfortable. Humans and Vorthak were forced to stay close together in the narrow tunnels, sharing air and space. The storm outside raged for days, making the air itself poisonous with radiation. During the long hours underground, something unexpected happened. Ryan Carter found himself working next to a young Vorthak warrior named Thekra, who was Zasketh's nephew. Despite the language barrier, they began sharing stories through drawings and gestures. Ryan drew pictures of Earth, showing Thekra images of human cities, families, and peaceful scenes. In return, Thekra drew pictures of Vorthak conquest, showing their empire spreading across many worlds by defeating other species. But as the days passed, Thekra's drawings began to change. He started asking questions about the peaceful scenes Ryan had shown him. Amy helped translate these conversations, and they discovered that Thekra had never seen beings who weren't either conquerors or slaves. "He wants to know why humans don't kill their weak," Amy explained to Ryan. "In Vorthak society, anyone who can't fight is left to die. He's confused about why we take care of children, old people, and the sick." The crisis came on the 4th day underground. A section of the cave collapsed, trapping 3 Vorthak warriors in a small chamber. The rocks were too heavy for even their great strength to move, and the trapped aliens were running out of air. Zasketh immediately declared that the 3 warriors were lost, and that the group should conserve their energy for more important things. This was normal Vorthak thinking. If someone was too weak to save themselves, they deserved to die. Jake refused to accept this. "We're going to get them out," he announced. "Captain, it's extremely dangerous," Ryan warned. "The whole cave system could collapse if we're not careful, and they're not even our people." But Jake was already organizing rescue teams. Danny studied the collapsed area and figured out how to safely remove the rocks. Dr. Blake calculated how much time they had before the trapped Vorthak suffocated. Kevin prepared medical supplies for when they were freed. What amazed the other Vorthak was that humans they barely knew were risking their lives to save Vorthak warriors who had tried to kill them just weeks before. This violated every rule of Vorthak society and thinking. Zasketh watched in confusion and growing anger as the humans worked for 18 straight hours to free his people. Several times he tried to order them to stop, saying it was foolish to risk the lives of many for the sake of 3 who were already as good as dead. "Why do you do this?" he demanded of Jake through Amy's translation. "They cannot help you. They cannot make you stronger. They tried to kill you. Why risk your lives? For them?" Jake paused in his work moving rocks and looked directly at Zasketh. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because they're living beings who deserve a chance to survive. Because if we only help people who can help us back, then we're not really helping at all." Amy struggled to translate concepts that had no equivalent in Vorthak language. Words like compassion, mercy, and doing the right thing simply didn't exist in their vocabulary. As the rescue continued, more Vorthak began to watch and even help despite their confusion. They moved rocks and brought water, not because they understood why, but because they could see the determination and purpose in the human workers. When the 3 trapped warriors were finally freed, they were barely conscious and badly injured. Dr. Kevin immediately began treating them, using precious medical supplies without hesitation. The rescued Vorthak included Thekra, who had become trapped when he went back to help an older warrior who couldn't move fast enough. Zasketh knelt beside his nephew as Kevin worked to save the young Vorthak's life. For the first time since the crash, the alien commander seemed to show something other than anger or suspicion. He watched Kevin's skilled hands working to heal rather than harm, and something changed in his fierce yellow eyes. "Your healer could have let my nephew die," Zasketh said quietly to Jake. "My nephew tried to kill your people. Why does your healer save him?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "Because Kevin is a doctor. His job is to heal anyone who needs healing, whether they're friend or enemy. That's what makes him strong." Amy translated, but she could see that Zasketh was struggling to understand. In Vorthak culture, strength meant the ability to kill your enemies, not save them. The idea that saving lives could be a form of strength was revolutionary. As Thekra's breathing steadied and his wounds were bandaged, Zasketh stared at the humans who had risked everything to save Vorthak lives. His entire worldview was being challenged by creatures he had dismissed as weak prey. The solar storm finally ended, and both groups emerged from the caves into the orange light of the alien sun. But something fundamental had changed during their time underground. The Vorthak were no longer certain that humans were weak, and the humans had seen that their enemies were capable of more than just violence. The real test of what they had all learned was still to come. After the cave rescue, the relationship between humans and Vorthak began to change in ways that neither group expected. Zasketh spent long hours thinking about what he had seen, while his warriors started asking questions that had never occurred to them before. Thekra, still recovering from his injuries, approached Jake one morning with Amy translating. The young Vorthak warrior seemed different now, less aggressive and more curious about the humans around him. "Uncle Zasketh says I should hate you for making me weak," Thekra said through Amy's translation. "But you saved my life when you could have let me die. This confuses me greatly." Jake sat down next to the young alien, noting how Thekra no longer showed his claws or bared his teeth when talking to humans. "Tell me about your homeworld, Thekra. What is it like?" Through Amy, Thekra described a harsh world where Vorthak children were taught to fight from the moment they could walk. Weakness of any kind meant death. The old, the sick, and the injured were left behind to die because taking care of them made the whole group weaker. "We conquer other worlds because we must," Thekra explained. "If we do not grow stronger by taking what others have, then someone stronger will come and take everything from us. This is the way of the universe." Dr. Lisa Blake had been listening to the conversation, and she asked Amy to translate a question. "Ask him if his people are happy living this way." The question seemed to confuse Thekra completely. Amy had to explain the concept of happiness, which was another word that didn't exist in Vorthak language. They had words for victory, conquest, and dominance, but nothing for contentment or joy. We do not think about happiness, Thekra finally answered. We think about survival and strength. These are the only things that matter. Lisa felt sorry for the young alien. Amy, ask him if he's ever seen a Vorthak smile or laugh. After several minutes of trying to explain what smiling and laughing meant, it became clear that Vorthak had no equivalent behaviors. Their faces could show anger, determination, or pain, but never joy or amusement. Meanwhile, Danny Walsh and Krauth had made significant progress on their joint project. They were trying to repair one of the communication devices from the crashed ship so they could call for rescue. Working together, they had combined human electronics with Vorthak metallurgy to create something neither could have built alone. Krauth is incredibly skilled, Danny told Jake during their evening meeting. But he's been taught that sharing knowledge makes you vulnerable. He keeps expecting me to try to steal his techniques or betray him somehow. Jake nodded. This was a problem they faced with all the Vorthak. They had been raised to believe that cooperation was a sign of weakness, and that anyone who helped you was probably planning to hurt you later. The breakthrough came when Dr. Lisa Blake decided to share human history with Zaska. She set up her portable computer and asked Amy to help translate, as she showed the Vorthak commander images and stories from Earth. She started with early human history, showing pictures of ancient tribes fighting each other for resources. Zaskath nodded approvingly at these images, recognizing behavior similar to Vorthak conquest. Your species was once strong like ours, Zaskath commented through Amy. What happened to make you weak? But Lisa continued the story, showing how humans had learned to work together in larger and larger groups. She showed them cities where millions of people lived peacefully side by side, sharing resources and knowledge. We didn't become weak, Lisa explained. We became stronger by learning to cooperate instead of just competing. She showed Zaskath images of human hospitals where doctors treated anyone who needed help, regardless of their ability to pay. She showed schools where adults spent their time teaching children instead of making them fight for survival. She showed retirement homes where young people took care of the elderly instead of abandoning them to die. Zaskath stared at these images with growing confusion and something that might have been wonder. But why do the strong ones not simply take everything from the weak ones, he asked. Because we learned that taking care of the weak makes everyone stronger, Lisa replied. When we help each other, we can accomplish things that no individual could do alone. She showed him pictures of spaceships, advanced technology, and peaceful colonies. We built all of this by working together. If we had continued fighting each other, we would never have left our home planet. Amy could see that Zaskath was struggling with these concepts. His entire identity was built around the idea that strength meant dominating others. But here was proof that cooperation could lead to even greater achievements. Dr. Kevin Ross joined the conversation, and Amy translated his words. In my culture, the strongest people are those who use their power to protect others instead of hurting them. A warrior who defeats enemies in battle is strong, but a doctor who saves lives is stronger. This statement seemed to physically pain Zaskath. He stood up abruptly and paced back and forth, his claws scratching at the ground. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed about strength and weakness, was being challenged by these small, soft creatures. You say that caring for the weak makes you strong, Zaskath said finally. But how can this be true? The weak consume resources without contributing anything useful. Jake stepped forward. Let me tell you about my grandmother, he said, waiting for Amy to translate. She was old and sick and she couldn't work or fight, but she taught me how to be brave when I was afraid, how to be kind when I was angry, and how to keep trying when things seemed impossible. She made me stronger by sharing her wisdom. Amy struggled to translate concepts like wisdom, kindness, and emotional strength. These ideas were so foreign to Vorthak thinking that she had to use multiple words and examples to even approximate their meaning. Zaskath sat down heavily, looking exhausted by the mental effort of trying to understand. In my culture, when warriors become too old to fight, they go into the wilderness alone to die with honor. We do not keep them alive to consume food that stronger warriors need. And how much knowledge dies with them? Lisa asked gently. How much experience and wisdom is lost forever? For the first time since the crash, Zasketh seemed uncertain about something his culture had taught him. He looked around at the humans, working peacefully together, sharing food and resources without fighting, helping each other solve problems instead of competing for dominance. Kraft approached the group, carrying the communication device he and Danny had been working on. The Vorthak engineer looked nervous as he spoke to his commander in their harsh language. Amy listened and then translated. He says the device is almost finished, but he needs Danny's help with the final connections. He's asking permission to continue working with a human. Zasketh looked at Kraft for a long moment. In traditional Vorthak society, asking for help was a sign of weakness that could result in punishment or death. But here was one of his best engineers admitting that he needed human assistance to complete an important task. Continue working together, Zasketh said finally. But remember that humans are... He paused, unable to finish the sentence. He had been about to say that humans were enemies or prey, but after everything he had witnessed, those words no longer seemed accurate. That night, as both groups prepared for sleep, Zasketh approached Jake privately. Amy came along to translate, though she was getting tired from the constant communication duties. Jake Morrison, Zasketh said, using the human's name for the first time. Your people have shown me things that contradict everything I have learned about strength and survival. I do not understand how caring for the weak can make you strong, but I cannot deny what I have seen. Jake nodded respectfully. It took our species thousands of years to learn these lessons, Zasketh. We made many mistakes along the way. We fought wars, enslaved each other, and did terrible things before we understood that cooperation was better than conquest. But how did you change? Zasketh asked. How did your warriors accept that protecting the weak was better than defeating enemies? Jake thought carefully before answering. We realized that our greatest enemy was not other people but our own worst impulses. The strongest humans are those who conquered their desire to hurt others, not those who conquered other people. Amy translated this, but she could see that Zasketh was still struggling to understand. The concept of fighting against your own nature, of choosing to be gentle when you had the power to be violent, was revolutionary for a species that had built their entire civilization on the principle that might makes right. As Zasketh walked back to his sleeping area, he passed Thekra, who was sitting with Ryan Carter and learning to play a simple card game. The young Vorthak was actually laughing at something Ryan had said, a sound that no Vorthak had ever made before. Zasketh stopped and stared at his nephew. Thekra looked happy, a concept that was supposed to be impossible for their species. But there he was, enjoying himself in the company of beings who should have been his enemies. For the first time in his life, Zasketh began to wonder if the Vorthak way of life was not the only path to strength. Danny Walsh and Kraft finally completed their communication device after 2 weeks of working together. The machine combined the best of human and Vorthak technology, creating something more powerful than either species could have built alone. It's working, Danny announced excitedly as he tested the device. We can send a distress signal to any ships in this system. Jake felt relief wash over him. After months on this moon, they finally had a chance to get home. But his relief turned to worry when Amy picked up an incoming signal on the new device. Captain, there's a fleet of ships approaching, Amy said, her face pale as she studied the readings. They're Vorthak vessels and they're heading straight for us. Zasketh heard the news and his expression became grim. It is Admiral Morgax, he said through Amy's translation. He is my commander and the leader of our invasion fleet. He comes looking for me and expecting a report of victory. Jake felt his stomach drop. What kind of report is he expecting? He expects me to have either destroyed all humans or captured them as slaves, Zasketh replied honestly. When he sees that we have been living together peacefully, he will consider it the greatest betrayal in Vorthak history. Over the next day, as the Vorthak fleet grew closer, the tension in both camps increased dramatically. Some humans wanted to hide in the caves and hoped the aliens would leave. Some Vorthak warriors urged Zasketh to kill all the humans quickly. so they could present their deaths to Admiral Morgax as evidence of loyalty. But something had changed in the weeks they had spent together. Thekra refused to even consider harming the humans who had saved his life. Kravith argued that the humans had taught them valuable knowledge that could benefit all Vorthak. Even some of the older warriors seemed uncertain about returning to their old ways. "We could fight together," Ryan Carter suggested during a meeting between the human leaders and Zasketh. "Your warriors and our people could stand together against this Admiral Morgax." Zasketh shook his massive head sadly. "You do not understand the power of a Vorthak fleet. Morgax commands 50 ships and thousands of warriors. We are perhaps 90 people total, and many of us are injured. Fighting would only result in all our deaths." Dr. Lisa Blake had been quiet during the discussion, but now she spoke up. "There might be another way. Zasketh, you said that Vorthak respect strength above all else. What if you could show your admiral a different kind of strength?" "I do not understand," Zasketh replied. Jake began to see what Lisa was thinking. "She means the strength we've shown here. The strength that comes from cooperation instead of conquest. The strength that builds instead of destroys." Amy translated carefully, but Zasketh looked doubtful. "Morgax would not understand such concepts. He would see it as weakness and kill us all for betraying Vorthak principles." The Vorthak fleet arrived the next morning. 50 sleek, deadly ships filled the sky above the moon, blotting out the sun with their dark hulls. The lead ship was twice the size of the others, covered in weapons and battle scars that told of countless victories. Admiral Morgax himself descended to the moon's surface in a small transport, accompanied by 20 elite warriors. He was even larger than Zasketh, with scars that covered his entire body and eyes that showed no mercy or compassion. Jake and his people watched from a distance as Morgax approached Zasketh's position. They could hear the Admiral's angry roars even from far away, though Amy could only catch fragments of the conversation. "He's demanding to know where the human slaves are," Amy whispered to Jake. "He wants to see proof that Zasketh has conquered us properly." Morgax's voice grew louder and more threatening. Amy continued translating the pieces she could understand. Now he's saying that if Zasketh has failed in his duty, he will be executed for betraying the Empire. Jake watched as Zasketh stood silently before his superior, not defending himself or making excuses. The human captain realized that Zasketh was facing an impossible choice: betray everything he had learned about human cooperation, or face death for refusing to follow Vorthak traditions. "I have to do something," Jake said, starting to walk toward the confrontation. Ryan grabbed his arm. "Captain, you'll just get yourself killed. There's nothing we can do." But Jake pulled free and continued walking. As he approached, he could see Morgax pointing his weapon at Zasketh's head, preparing to execute him for failure. The other Vorthak warriors stood in a circle, watching their leader's fate being decided. "Admiral Morgax," Jake called out loudly, causing every Vorthak head to turn toward him. Amy hurried to catch up, knowing she would need to translate. Morgax stared at Jake with surprise and contempt. He spoke rapidly in the Vorthak language, and Amy translated nervously. "He wants to know why a human slave dares to speak without permission." Jake walked directly up to the massive alien admiral, showing no fear despite being surrounded by heavily armed warriors who could kill him instantly. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel New Horizon. I am not a slave, and I come to speak for Commander Zasketh." The translation of this statement caused an uproar among the Vorthak warriors. The idea that a human would claim equality with their commander was shocking enough, but for that human to speak in defense of a Vorthak leader was beyond their comprehension. Morgax raised his weapon toward Jake, but before he could fire, something unprecedented happened. Zasketh stepped between them. "Admiral," Zasketh said in his own language, "this human has shown me something more powerful than conquest." Amy translated Zasketh's words for Jake, but she could see that Morgax was becoming more enraged by the moment. The Admiral clearly viewed any praise of humans as the ultimate betrayal. What happened next shocked everyone present, including Jake himself. Zasketh slowly removed his commander's armor piece by piece, until he stood wearing only simple clothing. Then, in full view of his fleet and his warriors, he knelt down on one knee before Jake. In Vorthak culture, this gesture meant complete submission. It acknowledged that the person you knelt before was your superior in every way. No Vorthak commander had ever knelt before a member of another species. "I kneel not because humans are stronger in battle," Zaketh announced in a voice that carried across the entire area. "I kneel because they have shown me true strength. The strength to help those who cannot help you. The strength to save those who tried to kill you. The strength to choose creation over destruction." Amy translated his words, but she could see that most of the Vorthak were struggling to understand what their commander meant. Morgax was so angry that he was literally shaking with rage. Jake helped Zasketh stand up, then turned to address Admiral Morgax directly. "Your commander has learned what my species discovered long ago. The greatest victory is not defeating your enemies, but turning them into friends." Through Amy's translation, Jake continued speaking to the assembled Vorthak. "Zasketh could have killed us all and claimed victory. Instead, he chose to learn from us. He chose to let his warriors work with ours. He chose to save lives instead of taking them." Thekra stepped forward from the crowd of Vorthak warriors. Despite his youth and lower rank, he spoke directly to Admiral Morgax. "Uncle Zasketh speaks truth," he said. "These humans saved my life when they could have let me die. They taught me that strength can mean protection instead of destruction." Kraft joined Thekra, holding up the communication device he had built with Danny. Working with humans made this device possible. Neither species could have created it alone. Cooperation multiplied our strength instead of dividing it. More Vorthak began stepping forward, each sharing something they had learned from working with humans. They spoke of medical techniques that saved lives, engineering methods that built better shelters, and ways of thinking that solved problems without violence. Admiral Morgax listened to these testimonials with growing confusion and anger. Everything he was hearing violated the fundamental principles of Vorthak society, but he could not deny that his warriors seemed stronger and more capable than when he had last seen them. "These humans have corrupted you," Morgax finally roared. "They have made you weak and foolish." Zasketh stood straight and looked his superior in the eyes. "They have taught me that true apex predators do not destroy everything they encounter. They protect and nurture what is valuable. Humans became the apex predators of their world not by conquering it, but by learning to work with it." Jake stepped forward one more time. "Admiral, your empire conquers through fear and force. But what do you build? What do you create? What legacy do you leave besides destruction?" Amy translated, and Jake continued. "We humans offer you something your empire has never had. The chance to grow stronger through cooperation instead of conquest. The chance to build instead of destroy. The chance to be remembered for what you created rather than what you destroyed." The moment hung in the air like a held breath. Admiral Morgax had the power to order the deaths of everyone on the moon. His fleet could destroy both humans and the Vorthak who had befriended them. But as he looked around at his warriors, Morgax could see something in their eyes that he had never seen before. They looked hopeful. They looked excited about possibilities beyond endless warfare and conquest. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Admiral Morgax lowered his weapon. "Show me," he said finally. "Show me this strength you speak of." In the days that followed, Admiral M.